Thanks for joining us, everyone. It's Owen Hexton speaking, Meridian's Investor Relations Manager. I'm here with Neil Barclay, Chief Executive, and Mike Roan, CFO. For the format of the call, Neil's going to make some comments following our market announcement this morning. We'll then open it up for questions. At that point, the call moderator will come on, give you the instructions for queuing questions. Over to you, Neil.
Okay, welcome everyone. So as you're aware, the smelter owners, Rio Tinto, are initiating a strategic review of its operations in New Zealand. We understand the review will look at all options to improve the economics of the smelter, and it could include exercising the termination provisions of the contracts with Meridian. They've also advised us that at this stage they intend to give an update on that strategic review by the end of the first quarter of 2020. Now, from our perspective, we continue to engage with the owners of the smelter through the review period, but ultimately Rio Tinto will decide the outcome of the smelter in New Zealand and its ongoing operations or not. I think it's important to note that the smelter owners have always had the right to issue 12 months notice to reduce consumption to terminate their contracts with us. And the fact that they haven't done so suggests that they're actively looking for solutions. That said, I think announcing a strategic review is a serious move. It's certainly an escalation. The smelter owners know this will be very unsettling for their own staff, stakeholders, and the wider community in Southland. And so, we know that they wouldn't have taken that decision lightly. But I'd also say that Rio Tinto is a huge global mining company, a major emitter that's making a lot of noise about cleaning up its operations. It would be a major call for them to close the smelter that produces some of the cleanest and purest aluminium globally. And on top of that, we know they face significant a cleanup bill for the site, and so any decision to withdraw from New Zealand would be a massive call for them. Not saying they won't do it, but they do have a few headwinds in terms of that decision. It's also common knowledge that the smelter receives the lowest electricity price in the country, but they've been very clear with us that they're looking for a price that's significantly lower again. And it's important to note that electricity generation is only one part of the equation. We know, given changes in Transpower's transmission costs and the like, that the smelter will see a reduction of $10 million in annualised costs accruing from next year. And if the transmission pricing reform is implemented as expected, that will deliver another $12 million of annualised costs, probably starting to accrue in 2024. That's the current time frame for that piece of work. So I think all up, we're open to continuing discussions, but I think Rio Tinto also knows that the solution will have to be a sustainable one that not only meets their needs, but is one that's acceptable to our shareholders. And like Meridian, we know they take their responsibility seriously, financial, social and environmental, so we remain open to discussions to determine whether we can find a solution, and are hopeful that we can. I guess the ball is now in their court. Rio officials in Australia, they will also talk to other energy providers and the government to explore options to find a viable solution for the smelter's future, and they'll engage with us when they're ready to do so. I think ultimately it's up to Rio Tinto to decide what happens with their operations here in New Zealand. We provide them one input into their review, our contract that gives price certainty over their electricity consumption, but there's other factors that obviously impact the ongoing viability of that facility. So that's it from me. We can open up to questions then, I think. There are none.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If you wish to ask a question, please press 01 on your telephone keypad. If you change your mind, so to withdraw your question, simply key 02. So that's 01 if you wish to ask a question. The first question we have is from Aaron Ibbotson from UBS. Please, sir.
Hi there. Good morning or good afternoon, I guess now. Thank you for setting up this call. So I've got a few questions, if I may. And my first question, basically, I guess, inspired by Brexit. What is Meridian's position here in these negotiations? are you genuinely willing to sort of walk away if Rio says that they will close it unless they get a major cut in energy prices? And if so, what would you expect to happen? And if I can qualify that second part, would you expect them to exit in a 12-month period as they have the option to do, or would you expect a more sort of orderly shutdown over a sort of 2 to 4 or 2 to 5 year period? Thank you.
Well, I think that the nature of the negotiations that we've been willing to enter into are, and put this in the context of, we renegotiated the head contract in 2013, well, it came into force in 2013. An element of that contract was repriced in 2017. And then as recently as last year, we contracted for another 50 megawatts of load. And they've been willing participants in each of those contracts. And I guess at each point, we've looked at the relative merits of doing the deal or not, and where our point of walk away was. So we're open to further conversations, but we've been looking for options that provide win-wins. And an example of a win-win would be an extension to this termination clause. We could potentially put a bit more in terms of price on the table, and we have done, but they haven't been really up for taking us up on that type of proposition. We've also been exploring options around demand response, where we think there's a lot of value on the table, left on the table, and available to the smelter if they were to provide a more flexible operation. And that could be, contracted by Meridian, but by other parties as well. So those are the sorts of conversations we're interested in having, ones that aren't just a case of one shareholder writing out a check, a big one, to another shareholder. And I guess there's a point that, yeah, absolutely, if they're not viable and they can't get a reasonable price from the New Zealand market, then they might have to close, and that would be an unfortunate outcome. But that would be something that we won't resolve from, because we're not going to just bend over and write that check. As I say, it's just economically not sensible for our shareholders. The second part of the question.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, we haven't actually had a conversation at any time with them, Aaron, about how that would play out. What we do know is they've got a 12-month termination clause where they can reduce from 572 megawatts down to 400 megawatts. It's a one-time only option. Or they've got a 12-month termination clause where they can go from 572 to 0 or from 400 to 0. You'd have to ask them what their intentions would be, but I don't think they're not at the point of deciding to close the smelter, so they probably wouldn't have a clear answer for that. But it's not something I can really comment on, but it would be their decision.
Okay, and then finally, can you just update us? I believe on your Capital Markets Day a couple of years ago, you sort of went through it in some detail, but what would be the sort of infrastructure transmission investments needed to avoid sort of this power effectively being stuck on the South Island if they indeed exited?
Hey Aaron, Mike here.
Hi there.
Mike here, I can take that question for you. As you say, we provided an update a couple of years back on infrastructure build to facilitate energy from Manapori and the Clutha power stations, then making their way up through the South Island and to the North Island to the extent there was an exit of the smelter or reduction in consumption. Transpower has completed some of the work to facilitate that, but there's about 3 years of work to complete by upgrading some of the remaining transmission lines at a cost of about $110 million. Right, so that would help the energy make its way from Southland to the rest of the South Island, and then Transpower would likely look at the the HVDC link and capacity on the link, and they do have plans for a fourth cable which would expand the capacity of that link between the South and North Islands. It sits in their plan as being about 5 years from date they decided to implement it, and it costs about $150 million. So there's potentially some further upgrades that they might do in the North Island between Palmerston North and the Hamilton, but those are not clear what their plan would be yet or how necessary they are. But same sort of order of time, between 5 and 8 years, and in the order of another $100 to $250 million.
Yeah, I think the bulk of the issue is dealt with that lower South Island grid upgrade.
That's it.
Which can be done in 3 summers.
That's it.
3 summers.
Possibly
Yeah.
so.
Okay. Yeah.
And we've got one coming up.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question we have is from Stephen Hudson from Macquarie Securities. Please go ahead.
Hi, Neil and Mike. I'm not sure how much you can share with us, but I'm just interested in your feel for the smelter's cash position after stay in business, CapEx costs, whether or not you can share a range of where you feel the smelter is at the moment and your confidence in that range. And just as a sort of a adjacent question, as you're arriving at that sort of estimation, what you're assuming in terms of long-term premium for Alpha and the use of the FE allocation as well?
Hey Steve, it's Mike here. I missed that last piece of the question, but
Premium for the purity.
for purity. Hey, so our estimates of the smelter's cash position is that based on the dynamics that we can see in play in forecast LME, alumina, and their underlying operating costs, we see a positive cash flow position for them this financial year, which is the calendar year 19 for them. So we don't see it as being a large free cash flow position for them, but we do see it as being positive on a standalone basis, so that's as a standalone smelter. We see that then improving based on those same forecasts as the alumina price and the aluminium price spread has reverted back to more normalised levels, which alumina costs increased materially at the beginning of this year. And so we see, 2020 free cash position improving from fin year 19 or calendar year 19 for them.
Sorry, Mike, that's useful. Just the second part of the question. I just wondered if you had any clarity on the premium. I think it's hovering at about $160 per ton at the moment, and reasonably stable at that sort of level. Although I know it's come off from sort of 400 a couple of years back. But what is there reasonable confidence that premium is going to hold at that sort of level? And I suppose the second part of the question is your analysis of the cash flow position, does that also include the ASI allocation, the fact that they're over allocated and they've used?
Right. Hey Stephen, just on that $160 a tonne premium, yep, we see that. In fact, our forecast is slightly north of that, as being a reasonable approximation of the premium that they receive, and at least our forecast suggests that's sustainable. But they will be able to comment on that as well, I'm sure. That piece of the question. So when I talk to free cash flow, our forecasts, we do it reasonably conservatively, is there were a lot of costs related to the P4 startup that we have captured in our underlying forecasts for their free cash position that actually run into calendar year 19 and calendar year 20. But we don't have insight into those capital costs. Did they expense them all this year, or will they roll through on an OPEX basis moving forward? Is that where your question was?
Yeah, there's also, I think you're also asking about the glide path on the industrial allocation, Stephen?
What you said was useful, Mike, but it is really the glide path. I mean, we had a pretty good decision 2 months ago, but, you know, when you read into that, the cabinet minutes, it looks like there's scope for the ministers to take a much more aggressive approach on a, you know, industry by industry basis, and it does look, given the wording, that they could take a much more aggressive approach on NZAS if they wanted to, and particularly given they're over allocated.
Yeah, we haven't assumed that, Stephen. So we've assumed the sort of glide path that's currently public. And if you model that through it, there's no material impact on the smelter through to 2030.
So you're just assuming the 1, 2, 3 glide path.
Yeah.
Yep. And just one final question, sorry guys, and then I'll leave it to somebody else. But in terms of whether or not you feel this is a specific asset issue, or you know, we can all see what's going on publicly, but you know, to what extent Rio's going to be moving on to Bell Bay and Boyne Island, and you know, this is just part of a broader cost out program. You know, how would you balance the two?
Oh, look, I couldn't really make a comment about their broader corporate objectives, but what we do know, and as I said earlier, this is an escalation. We haven't seen them propose a strategic review of this particular facility before, and you know, I don't think they've taken that decision lightly, given the amount of disruption it will cause for that business.
Yep. Okay, thanks guys.
Thank you. The next question we have is from Neville Glass from John. Please go ahead.
Hi, team. A number of questions from me. Probably, I'll start off with, I guess, what is probably the key one. In the 2012 to 2013 negotiations, I guess you ended up sort of roughly an indifference price that was embodied in the 2013 deal. I'm just wondering if the conditions, your outlook for the counterfactual, so for the exit, is better or worse than it would have been back in 2012, and I'm guessing it would be better, with sort of a higher outlook for gas price, perhaps the decarbonisation growth becoming a lot more, you know, higher likelihood. So for a starter, I just wonder if you could comment on that.
Hey, Nev, there's not a, you know, in our view, there's not a material difference. You know, as you say, the forecast that is out there are reasonably positive compared to where the forecast prices were back then, but our view of indifference is probably around the same level.
Great. Okay, that's useful. Thanks. So I guess that goes to what you'd have, you know, the implication being that you're roughly indifferent still on the current contract prices, so there needs to be some sort of exchange. Would you consider a lower price for lower volume? And is that something you think the smelter would think about?
I think a smaller smelter, it's kind of hard to see how it'll be a more profitable smelter. But that said, they do have a significant portion of upcoming CapEx on one of the potlines, potline 1. And yeah, we've got no details around it, but they've given us a rough number of $60+ million, and it's to do with changing out the rectiformers. Does seem like very expensive rectiformers, but if you take them at their word, there's a chunk of cash to be spent on one of those potlines, and so it may be logical for them to sort of reduce production, and so they go back, from our perspective, reduce our contract commitment to 400 megawatts.
Would you think about making that a condition of a cheaper price?
Look, we've been exploring options mainly around term for price. I don't think a lower price on the lower level of volume is necessarily a good option for us either. And if you think about that point of indifference where we're just about at, there has to be some sort of exchange, and I'm not sure if that's one that we consider.
Are you assuming, in the case you do a deal, sort of third question, that 2030 closure is likely, or how do you think about sort of the doing a deal scenario, the likelihood of the smelter continuing past 2030?
Oh, look, there are smelters operating in the world that have been there since the 20s, I think, last century. So it still produces a fine grade of aluminium, as you know, high purity. I can only see the international competitiveness of this facility improving, but I've got a pretty strong view in terms of the cost of carbon in the future.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not a hard close in 2030. That's not our assumption set at all.
Great. Yeah, that's useful. Thank you. And I guess a bit of leave room for other questions. So just one last one from me. In terms of realistic timeframe, obviously this brings a bit of uncertainty. They're not. I understand you guys will still be talking to them, but formal negotiations, if such things are entertained, don't sound like that would happen until late in Q1 next year or just after. What's a realistic time frame for this uncertainty to be resolved, do you think?
Well, they have indicated they would they expect to complete their review by the end of the first quarter of next year. So I'm reading into that they would expect to complete key negotiations before that time.
Okay. So you expect formal negotiations and sort of, rooms full of lawyers both sides, sort of happening before March.
You might, Nev, and you've been there before, so you know what it's like. You might have a period of documentation, but I would expect, based on what they've told us, that it's their intention to get a deal done, even if final documentation takes a bit longer, within that sort of time frame. And that deal, as I say, could be with multiple parties. We're just one party to this particular exercise.
Right. Okay, very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question we have is from Kevin Braun from White House Perpetual. Please go ahead, sir.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. So I just wanted to clarify that you said that you have not been in communication with Rio Tinto and they just abruptly put this review into place without communicating with you guys first?
No, I didn't say that. We were always in conversations with NZAS, who are owned by Rio Tinto. Like I say, we did a contract with them for an extra 50 megawatts middle of last year. We've had a conversation going on with them around a potential demand response product. They've been constantly telling us their economics are challenged, so we started talking about a price per term type conversation. So it has been an ongoing conversation. Yes, but it wasn't until we got a phone call at 6 o'clock last night that suggested that they were going to go down this route. So it's the first notice we got that a strategic review was actually on the table.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question we have is from Adrian Essen from Morningstar. Please go ahead, sir.
Hi, guys. I'm just wondering if the Gentile is going to put a bit of a pause on new generation CapEx until the uncertainty's gone.
Well, I can't speak for other generators. We received consent on our Harapaki wind option in Northern Napier yesterday, which was quite a bit of good news, to give us a higher tip height to improve the economics of that wind farm massively. Obviously, any decision to go forward with the build will be in the context of how this conversation shakes out. But in terms of the other generators, you'd have to talk to them about their build aspirations and plans.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, sir. As a reminder, if you wish to ask a question, please press 01 on your telephone keypad. If you change your mind and decide to withdraw your question, simply key 02. Once again, if you wish to ask a question, please press 01 on your telephone keypad. And the next question we have is a follow-up from Aaron Ibbotson from UBS. Please go ahead, Aaron.
Yes, hi there. Since no one else asked, I have to ask, have you guys considered buying the smelter yourself or potentially cooperating with somebody else and doing it? Somebody who knows about steel making or aluminium making, or indeed some of the other gentailers? Are those type of discussions entertained at all?
Not today, Aaron. It's fair to say that we're an electricity generator. Don't know too much about aluminium smelting. So that conversation has not taken place. Certainly not with Rio Tinto or Ensis or any other party in the market from our perspective. Hey, but the strategic review, and we're not running it, but it'll be an interesting exercise, and who knows what will come out of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next question we have is from Grant Swaran-Pole from Investment Partners. Please go ahead.
Good morning, all. Afternoon, all. Just a quick question. You said you wouldn't take one for the team as per your predecessor, but you have been negotiating directly or at least putting offers into NZAS. Have you been putting these offers in with the collaboration of some of your competitors who would be negatively impacted, or is this just on your own bat as a first pass?
We have invited other parties to engage with the smelter. From our understanding, as no one has wanted to participate in those conversations. So, yeah, the conversation that we've had going with them has been, if you like, of equal value to Meridian and the smelter from our perspective. So we're looking after our own interests. But as far as I'm aware, no other party has been willing to engage.
Yeah, and then thank you. And then a follow-on from some of Neville's questions. When this next 3 to 4 months or 4 to 5 month period, during the period, would you guys be considering going to Rio with a whole lot of options along the lines of, Transpower's probably going to spend $500 million just to rebalance the grid if it wasn't for TY exit that potentially might not be needed in the future, and you could go put to them a exit clause on 3 or 4 years' time with a far deeper discount on the electricity price, to actually give them a whole lot of options to think about? Or is this just you keep on playing your hand close to the chest and they play theirs close to the chest?
We have a pretty frank and open conversation with them, Grant. So we're open to any ideas, but they've got to be a fair exchange of value. And you started your question with, we're not going to take one for the team. And I want to make it really, really clear, I absolutely hold firm to that view. Meridian has underwritten this, the contract price of the smelter for a long time now. We continue to play our part, but we're not going to take one for the team.
But even the team should be getting together and trying to put something in place of the counterfactuals for something to take a 3-year exit as opposed to a 1-year exit, put that in place, and you could potentially give away the fuel for almost free for a 3-year view as long as they stick around taking it.
Well, we think there's value for a lot of other parties within that conversation. You can't get together though, Grant, because there's Commerce Act law that doesn't really allow us to do that. But there are other mechanisms for people to engage with the smelter and do what we think is sensible, what you might think is sensible.
Yeah.
And in 2013, yep.
I was just going to say, we have successfully entered into arrangements with other parties back in 2017, and then, as Neil mentioned, for the connection of the extra 50 megawatts in 2018. So there is a track record, but we can only do our piece and then open up the line of communication. So.
And then I think you indicated that they had already spoken a bit to government a little while ago and that this would continue. Now, in 2013, the government tipped in 30 million, and I think at the time they said that's it. Do you think the government has got their head around some of these issues and could engage on a meaningful way?
Look, I understand they've been speaking to the government and ministers regularly over recent times. You might have noticed a press release from the Minister of Energy this morning, who said in her opening line, I quote, where is it? Sorry, struggling to find it. But anyway, she's basically saying that there's no way the government will subsidise them or bail them out in any way, shape or form. Now,
Perfect.
well, I think the conversation can, though, be directed back towards the TPM, because as we all know, they do pay a greater portion of the transmission costs in this country than is fair and reasonable, and that would actually help their economics reasonably significantly. And it's a process that's underway anyway. The EA have come up with a logical reason, and there's lots of benefits across the country for a reformed TPM. And if they deliver the outcomes that they're suggesting they'd like to, then it's a reasonably significant reduction in transmission costs to the smelter. But that starts to occur in 2024, so it's a long-winded process. And if we could speed up that process some way, it might ease the burden and improve the outlook for the owners.
Excellent. That's it from me. Thanks so much for your answers.
Thank you. The next question we have, I think, is from Mark Zauder from Nisoon.z. Please go ahead, sir.
Hi. I'm not sure if this is necessarily a question that you're in a position to answer, but to the best of your understanding, what would need to change for Rio Tinto to stay? Is it just an issue of transmission pricing? Is it something else? Or is this more of an empty threat just to get a better deal on transmission pricing?
Look, it's difficult for us to say exactly, but no, they're looking for a reduction in the delivered energy and the delivered cost of energy to the smelter. And they're looking at that across both the energy component and the transmission component. I think that's only 30% of their cost base, of course, so they have to look at other aspects of their operation. But they are looking across full gambit of their operations, and when it comes to energy, it's energy as well as transmission that they're concerned about. I mean, as we see it today, the cost of energy to the smelter is certainly top quartile in the globe.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question we have is from Weredi Koheri from National Business Review. Please go ahead.
G'day, gentlemen. I just have two questions. The first one, just picking up on the investment answer around the Napier wind farm. I just wanted to confirm I heard it correctly that consents had been received yesterday on that wind farm.
Yeah, we got a consent for increasing the tip height. And that makes it, I mean, it was a viable wind farm anyway, but it makes it well in the money. And certainly a buildable option.
Great. And as a result of the strategic review today, the decision to go ahead with that wind farm will then have to be made in the context of the review.
Oh, look, yeah, I'd say that's the short answer. The reality is we're still absorbing, the call from last night, and we need to think through how we manage the business and the kinds of decisions we need to make over the next few months. But the short answer would be yes.
And my second final question, should the smelter close, from Meridian's point of view, how will that impact on electricity prices?
so it's less than obvious in the long run, Larry, and you know, so if the smelter closes, what's likely to play out is transmission build, as I mentioned, and you know, what that will likely do is see a change in the way that electricity is supplied. So, you know, off the back of a termination, we would probably terminate an agreement that we have with Genesis that people refer to as the swaption. And there are a number of other arrangements that we have in place that might get terminated as well, which would see, I would say, many parties look at the generation assets and resources that they utilise and likely see quite a different electricity system than we see today. So there'll be short-run reduction in prices in Southland until transmission is built out. And then as that kind of redetermination of supply resources plays out, we'd likely see prices being lower than they would otherwise be. But as that plays out, they're likely to equalise over time.
Sure. Great. Thanks, gentlemen.
Sorry, the next question we have is from Neville Glass from Jarden. Please go ahead.
Hi, team. Sorry, just one more follow-up from me. Just in respect to that last question, I mean, what kind of time frame do you think is involved before you renormalise? Should we think 2 to 3 years, 3 to 5, 5 to 8? Sort of, you know, what roughly kind of time frame do you think the impact would be in effect?
Nev, it does come down to those two things. One's reasonably clear, which is the build of the transmission line between Southland and the rest of the country, and that's the 3-year kind of, or 3 summers that we've referred to. And the second one just comes down to how quickly is there a reset in the thermal generation base. Really, so however long really that takes is how long it would take before prices then normalise. So
if I were to suggest 3 to 5, that is not sort of out of bounds?
No. I'd say people are able to make pretty immediate decisions, subject to us, as I mentioned, making some or providing notice under contracts, and then others making decisions in their own right. But 3 years seems realistic. 5 years seems like the outside of the envelope.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. As a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to ask a question, please press 01 on your telephone keypad. If you change your mind and decide to withdraw your question, simply key 02.
Right.
Well, as a final reminder, if you... there's no further questions.
Everyone's had a good chance, so we'll wrap it up there. Thank you for your attendance. No doubt there'll be more information flowing over the next few months as the strategic review plays out and we get a better handle on how it's going to end up. So thanks. Cheers.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes your conference call for today. We thank you for joining and ask that you disconnect your lines. Have a great afternoon, morning, or evening ahead.